This is the Drew Sylver Show. The truth, whether you like it or not. Now, on today's episode, we're going to get into Braden Peters being in Israel. His name is also Clavicular. Apparently, the entire world is losing their damn minds about this. I'm going to explain why everyone's wrong. I'm going to go into what exactly, morally speaking, why it's wrong. Then, after that, apparently Mark Carney the Prime Minister of Canada, went to the Alberta stampede in, of course, Alberta, and he was subsequently booed at a stadium, which comes to us as a surprise to the fake news, the state-sponsored media CBC, who has falsely reported that apparently he's doing incredibly well in Alberta. That's a lie. The Court of Public Opinion has proven that. And the final thing is the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, crashes in flaming defeat because the vice president effectively was negotiating against himself, plus more updates on the developing situation in Iran. Hopefully this time the president will take decisive action and finish the job, because weakness is futile when dealing with the #1 state sponsor of terrorism in the world, being Iran. All covered on today's episode of The Drew Sylver Show. Stay tuned. Okay, so let's jump right into it. So who is Braden Peters? Braden Peters is a social media influencer. He is a 20-year-old social media influencer in the kind of online right world, on the kind of manosphere. And his whole thing is about quote-unquote looksmaxing, which I was unaware of this term until very recently. Apparently, it's what a lot of young people use. And this individual is probably one of the most superficial and materialistic. And when I say that, I mean that very literally, because he was actually, I'm just reading here a New York Post article. He went on Michael Knowles' show, Michael Knowles' The Daily Wire, and he apparently, he is so superficial that he claimed to have supported Trump, this being Braden Peters, and then he switched up and decided to support Gavin Newsom instead of supporting J.D. Vance. And why is he doing that? Well, because he believes that Gavin Newsom is better looking than J.D. Vance. So, I mean, if you're getting this idea of exactly what he stands for and how he acts and how he views humans, specifically women, who he refers to as female humanoids, which is very, very bizarre, and that's not how normal people talk about other people. He has obviously been this guy who is obsessed with looksmaxing. And what actually is looksmaxing? Well, it seems to me it's kind of like this hedonistic, individualist kind of, not worship of the self, but maybe some deep self-conscious behavior wherein all you care about is your superficial appearance and how you present yourself to other people on a physical level, nothing beyond the physical. And that is obviously not the ideology that you want to be learning about when you're a young, developing male, especially because men are unique and men are important in society. And we cannot have society. We cannot have a healthy, functioning society without normal men. So, this is rather disturbing. Anyway, it's getting all heated up while this individual, or everyone, got very, very upset at Braden Peters because he, and this correctly so, is a few months back, he was last seen with Nick Fuentes, with the Tate brothers, with Sneeko, who are both Muslim extremists. And they were last seen jamming out to the song Heil Hitler. So I'm not sure if he really likes Jews or the West. It seems that he doesn't. But for some reason, there are a lot of influencers in the Jewish sphere that have been kind of cozying up to him. Specifically, this individual by the name of Yossi Farrow. He is this guy who wraps tefillin or phylacteries for my non-Jewish listeners. It is a thing that Jewish men have to do 1 to 3 times a day during the light. Not on holidays. It is a way of connecting to God. It is very, very important in Judaism, and he likes to wrap tefillin on different Jewish men. And I think that it was a very good thing, because he went and found, this Yossi Farrow, found some of the most well-known, the most famous men, and convinced them to wrap tefillin. And many of these men, these Jewish men, have been so disconnected from Judaism their entire life, and he was wrapping tefillin with them. That is a great message, because typically, when you get closer to religion, you become a better person. If you do things that are immoral, if you have a history of doing things that are immoral, then getting closer to religion is actually a very good thing. Because when you get closer to religion, at least the Judeo-Christian tradition, we have a very forgiving God. If you repent, if you understand what you did before was wrong, and you want and you promise and you dedicate yourself to having a more religious, having a more godly life, that is a net positive for society. So that is a very good objective. That's a very good goal. What Yossi Farrow has kind of devolved into, it seems, at least from my perspective, is a more clout-chasing, kind of entirely out for the clicks type of content. And this is most evidenced by his work that he has been doing with this guy, Braden Peters, also known as Clavicular. We're going to just call him Braden Peters for just to make things easier. And he was last seen with Braden Peters. So first he was doing some weird thing with Braden Peters. He was doing a Chullent review with Braden Peters, kind of, pandering to him and his kind of manosphere audience, who most of them actually really, 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 really hate Jews. If you don't believe me, just check all the comment sections in all of the videos that anything that Braden Peters produces or anything that his allies produce. It doesn't seem like they're particularly pro-Jewish, but also the way that they talk about women is particularly disgusting. And I say this as a religious Jew. I say this as an observant Jew because women in Judaism are incredibly holy. They're so supremely holy. And as a religious person and as religious people, who I assume many are listening to this, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, women are unique. Women are important. Women are necessary in society. And if we do not have a society that elevates women, we do not have a society that elevates men, that understands that both men and women are complementary to each other, then it devolves very quickly. And I understand that there's been a lot of these kind of manosphere types that have been rising since the feminist movement, the modern feminist movement, has been running roughshod in society for the past, let's say decade or so. And I understand that because that has been so widespread and so pervasive, I understand a lot of men have felt disenfranchised. But the response to that is not to degrade women. It's not to act like an 8th century barbarian. It's not to act like an 8th century king and gallivant around treating women like objects. That's exactly what the feminist movement wants you to do. What you actually should be doing is valuing monogamy, valuing that men and women are made to be together. We need to value monogamous male-female relations. Male, female, men and women need to get married. It is very, very important for a healthy society. And this individual Clavicular, kind of his entire shtick, his entire performance is directly contra to all of those ideas. And instead of trying to fix that, it seems as though this individual, Yossi Farrow, is not trying to bring him closer to God, but he's kind of just trying to pander to his audience. And this all came to a head very recently when Braden Peters decided to go to Israel. Who flew him to Israel? I'm actually not sure the details. I want to look that up. I suggest everyone looks that up themselves, who the donors or who the sponsors or who the organizations that brought him to Israel actually are. And they brought him to Israel, and a lot of people were very upset. I understand why a lot of people were very upset. Actually, correctly so. There are a lot of people who are getting kind of out of hand here because a lot of people are like, oh, he shouldn't be allowed in Israel. He should, because he's an anti-Semite or whatever. Now, I actually think that, Israel is a free Western democracy. If you are doing disgusting things that are not illegal, then it's not necessary that you should be barred from the country, obviously, because it's a free democracy. That's not how free democracies work. You can do whatever the hell you want, no matter how disgusting, as long as it is legal in any Western country, and it seems as though that's what's happening, and people getting mad about that he shouldn't be allowed on those bases. I don't understand. I don't think there's any grounds to that. If he was like someone like Sneeko, who's a Muslim radical, who would be very, very clearly, as he said in his X posts that are written by Grok apparently, but we'll get into that in another episode. But as this individual Sneeko says constantly, that he would be aiding and abetting terrorists like Hamas, like Hezbollah, like literally any known terrorists anywhere that wants to commit jihad, he would be helping. So if it was someone like him, I would understand why he'd be banned. But someone like Clavicular or Braden Peters, it doesn't make a lot of sense. However, where it does get really, really, really clear in what the egregious acts are is that apparently there are some Jewish influencers, there are some Jewish or quote-unquote influencers. Anyone who has a following of 10 plus K followers considers themselves an influencer. And I'm telling you right now, most of these influencers, I wouldn't trust if they told me what to eat for dinner. Like, I'm sorry, but maybe you haven't met a lot of these influencers. I think that the thing that most of them, not all of them, love the most is themselves, unfortunately. And there has been a very large inflation of the influencer class, especially in the last 5 years. So a lot of these quote unquote Jewish influencers or pro-Israel influencers have actually been working with him. A lot of people from this organization called Let's Do Something, which is actually a great organization. They do amazing stuff on campus. They claim to stand with morality. They bring moral clarity to campus. So I don't understand why it is that they are bringing someone by the name of Clavicular, someone like Braden Peters, to Israel, and to like what are they going to do? Show him that Israel's a great place? I mean, if they want, they could, but that's not what they're doing. What it looks like most of them are doing, and there's actually evidence of this, we're going to go to the clip soon, is there's footage of some of the leaders of these organizations literally whoring their sisters out.
This like 35-year-old girl wants to meet up with you and her daughter. Look at her.
Does she want to have sex?
Bro, look at her.
Yes.
Bro.
But like, just tell the girls I'm just looking to have sex in a bathroom for 5 seconds.
5 seconds?
Maybe 10 if they're lucky.
And unfortunately, it seems like many of their sisters are completely and totally complicit in this action. So if you claim to be an organization and you claim to want to stand for some sort of principled moral backbone that is going to hold our society, our Western civilization together, then you go and do stuff like this. I mean, that's utterly disgusting, and you should not be considered a quote-unquote Jewish influencer who is supporting Israel. You should be considered exactly what you are, a hedonistic narcissist who is only out for their own personal gain and has legitimately no morals. And it's a very unfortunate thing that is happening. And I think that everyone is correctly upset for some reasons and, blowing it out of proportion for others. Again, a free country, he's allowed to be in Israel. Should it be promoted by Jewish influencers? Absolutely not, and they're egregious for doing so. Moving on, I think that it is high time to move on. There is an other story today, of course. This happened a few days ago, is the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, is in Alberta for Alberta Stampede. Alberta Stampede is this huge event that happens in Alberta. It is a very, very important event. There are lots of people there. And during this event, it's a very patriotic event, very Canadian patriotic event. And, I'm sure everyone remembers last year where the Prime Minister, the now former Prime Minister, who's been most recently seen gallivanting around with Katy Perry, was last seen there not knowing how to flip a pancake. So this year, of course, the Prime Minister made sure he knew how to flip a pancake, kind of. But the most important thing is there are some interesting reports coming out that he showed up to an event. He showed up to this event that took place in a big stadium, and he was completely and totally booed. And I'm mentioning this. We're actually going to show the clip down here.
Korea. Please welcome the Right Honorable Mark Carney, Prime Minister of Canada.
Oh my God, everyone's booing.
But I mention this, and I mention why it's so important, because a lot of people, especially the state-sponsored media, CBC, they have been boosting Mark Carney for the past year. Obviously, they were the ones who were laying propaganda for him during the election, because obviously they are an element of the government at this point in Canada, and that is just a known fact. And they were obviously inflating his poll numbers in Alberta. And it was all hunky-dory. Everything was doing great in Alberta, according to the poll numbers that were produced by CBC. And then he shows up to events and he's getting booed. I mean, it just shows the ridiculous disconnect between CBC and the rest of Canada. And most importantly, the fact that the poll that they were showing was ambiguous, to say the least. Now, the poll that they are using is an Ipsos poll that was taken, I think, a month or two ago. It was taken back in April, and the poll showed the Ipsos poll over here. It showed that, let's see, it was he had an approval rating of approximately 40 to 45%, according to this Ipsos poll, and that effectively stayed the same throughout the duration of his term as Prime Minister Mark Carney. Now I'm going to go to some different polls, and again, the place that this poll gets wrong is very important, because I want to get into this and I want to really emphasize where the disconnect is in CBC and of course normal Canadians. So it says, actually, funny enough, in some other polls, I would say the let's find out, what is this poll? The Abacus data from the Abacus poll. I think it's a little bit better, a little bit more reliable. He went from having a 45% approval rating in December of 2025, and he went down to having a 40% positive approval rating. This was in Alberta, and that isn't even the best part, because the fact that it went down from 45 to 40% is okay, great, but that's in all of Alberta. And when you take all of Alberta, you're going to get an average of urban and rural. But here is where the divide gets very interesting, because it seems that Edmonton is the strongest at a 52% approval rating, higher positive impressions, obviously, because Edmonton, while there is obviously, it is more conservative than other major cities in Canada because it's in Alberta. That is basically the only thing that makes it a bit more conservative, is because it's in Alberta. For those who don't know, Alberta is significantly more conservative, more based in reality than the rest of Canada. But unfortunately, major cities everywhere are a little bit more left-leaning, and Edmonton is no exception to that, including Calgary. Calgary as well. Calgary in Alberta is middling at about 45% approval, but then when you get to rural communities, that's where it's interesting, because rural communities actually have a much weaker number. In fact, only 30%, less than 30% approve of Mark Carney. That is significantly lower. So, when you get a poll that's like, 45% approve of Mark Carney, he's actually getting more approval now as time goes on. CBC is reporting lies. I'm sorry, they are completely and totally lying to you. What they have neglected to report time and time again, since he's been elected, since the Prime Minister Mark Carney has been elected, and since his Liberal government has been running roughshod, has been not enforcing the law, has been allowing the open borders to just run insane roughshod, when he has been demonizing Alberta up until 5 seconds ago, when they legitimately threatened to separate, and there is real grounds for them to do so right now. Now, of course, he's pandering to them, but up until very recently, Ottawa always, historically, kind of just snarls at the great Albertan people. And I'm sorry, that is not how you have a functioning country. So no wonder that most normal, hardworking Canadians in Alberta don't really like Mark Carney and don't really like the Liberal government. Correctly so. So just kind of to summarize this whole thing is Mark Carney shows up in Alberta, and everyone in the big city, sure, sometimes they're fine with him. CBC, the state-sponsored media, has been, of course, They've been truly glazing him. They have been making him seem to be some, amazing figure, amazing prime minister. He is the greatest prime minister. Even the people of Alberta don't really hate him that much. But what they've always neglected to show is the fact that less than 30% of people in rural communities in Alberta actually like him. Less than 30%. And that poll is probably inflated to begin with. So, you may not believe that, but then you show up to Alberta, then you go, you have an event in a stadium where you're actually, where the polling data comes to life, because Mark Carney shows up, everybody's booing him. I got to show you this clip. This clip is it's ridiculous. Now, of course, people on X are going crazy about this, or they're pointing out reality, because unfortunately in Canada, the only place to get real news is X. And the issue with X is you actually can't trust everybody. And it's a very big issue. When you censor media, you have to find someone to trust. So a lot of people in Canada are going to X, which is great, but unfortunately there is a large circulation of, for lack of better words, just bullcrap that it's going around. So it's very difficult to believe, to know who to believe in Canada. And that is entirely, the government of Canada is entirely responsible for that. Okay, so we're now moving on to our next story. Just ridiculous. Honestly, it is a truly ridiculous thing that we have a prime minister who has been effectively unelected. He got support because during the election, the media, the mainstream media in Canada, which is all, they're entirely ideologically unified. They have no ideological diversity whatsoever. They all kind of believe the same liberal worldview. They were all propping him up the entire election, and they were all demonizing Poilievre, who was the leader of the opposition, is the leader of the opposition. He effectively got in a very, let's say ambiguous way. And he's been kind of just quiet his entire term. All he's been doing is policy behind the scenes. His foreign policy has been completely egregious. His foreign policy has actually been, funny enough, interestingly, which is actually going to segue us into the next part of the show, is the foreign policy that you see from Mark Carney and his team is very similar to people on the, I don't want to say woke right, because there are some people that are on the right that just have some woke right adjacent views, and they may not necessarily identify as woke right, but they have a lot more in common with the woke right than they do with, the right, with their prefrontal cortex still moving and functioning. And with all of that, let's get into the MOU in Iran, the war with Iran, and how it has come down into a crashing defeat, unfortunately. But again, the MOU in Iran coming down in a crashing defeat is an example of this exact kind of foreign policy blowing up in the face of the negotiators. Because, unfortunately, the vice president and his negotiating team thought it was a good idea to go and to negotiate with Iran, a genocidal terrorist regime that murdered over 50,000 people in a single weekend in January. They thought that it was a good idea to go and negotiate with them. And how were they negotiating? Well, they were negotiating effectively a terms sheet that throughout the entire negotiation and the promotion of this MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, each of the sides were saying completely and totally different things. Iran was like, oh, this is great. It's doing this, this, and this. And then the vice president was saying, no, actually, it's not. It's not. We're still going to have control of the Strait of Hormuz. But then Iran's like, no, we're going to have control of the Strait of Hormuz. And then, of course, the most egregious part of this memorandum of understanding is without any conditions whatsoever, they were going to, the Americans, according to the vice president, were going to just randomly unfreeze $300 billion in cash in Iranian assets for, of course, directly going that will go directly to the IRGC, and that will then subsequently go to continue to fund terrorism that they have been doing in the Middle East for the last 50 years. Because, of course, Iran funds Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. I can go on. And when you're negotiating with people like that, you're probably not going to get the deal that you actually have written down. You're going to get something very different. And it took, let's see, how long did it take? It was negotiated in like June, let's say June 22nd, maybe June 23rd. I don't quote me on the date, but around then, there was all the high-level talks that were taking place and the signing of the MOU, and of course the vice president humiliating himself by taking a picture with the Iranian officials, as well as verbally complimenting and laying rhetorical homage to the Pakistani military, which is surprising because last time I checked, they were no ally of America. Maybe they're an ally of China, but they were certainly no ally of America and certainly no ally of the West. But nevertheless, this proceeded for a little bit, and it took approximately 3.5 seconds for Iran to violate the MOU, as we all predicted. Now, just before they violated, actually, they were violating the MOU since the very beginning. They were allegedly firing rockets at ships since this happened. But this all came to a real head, I think, the other weekend when there was a gigantic funeral held by the Islamo-fascist regime for the Islamo-fascist dictator of Iran, Khamenei. He was killed in an epic Israeli strike that took place in January of this year. And they did a big, big funeral. Of course, only their employees, the IRGC's employees, were out. No actual Iranian, because the Iranian regime does not represent any of the Iranian people. And I know this because I speak to Iranians in the Iranian community, in the Iranian diaspora on a daily basis. And I know for a fact this is completely and totally a regime that does not represent its people at all. So they had all of their employees out there for this funeral. And of course, there were a bunch of anti-American voices like Jackson Hinkle and other notable characters. But what was most important is at this thing, again, while there was allegedly an MOU, a memorandum of understanding that was signed and a photo op was done and all of this, during this time, at the funeral of Khamenei, there was a bunch of posters of very specific people, actually. Now these specific people, there was, who were the people? They were literally, they were holding pictures of people like Ben Shapiro, of people like Mark Levin, and of course, most importantly, the President of the United States, Donald Trump. They were holding pictures of all these people with bullets, with targets directly on their head, implying that they were on their direct kill list. I mean, I wouldn't call those people allies. I really, really wouldn't. And for the longest time, the vice president and his entire team were criticizing people who were critical of the MOU a lot more than they were criticizing the genocidal dictatorship, the Islamo-fascist theocracy in Iran that time and time and time again vowed to obliterate the entire American the entire American military structure and the entire American leadership. At every chance they get, they continue to promote the murder. They continue to plan different assassination plots on the president himself, and they're still negotiating with these people. So, you know, the MOU being dead is very important. The MOU, the fact that it came to life to begin with, is a very, very, very difficult thing, or is a was very catastrophic. And the fact that it was and the reason it was catastrophic is because it promoted a worldview that is highly, highly problematic. It promoted a lie. America is not the strongest country in the world. That we should shrink back from the world stage. We should retreat. We should just completely and totally disappear, and we should allow the middle powers to rise up and to, you know, control their own respective territories, because that would lead to a more peaceful world. No, obviously, you know, not difficult negotiating partners, not adversaries with different interests. No. These people are terrorists. I think that people need to understand that the Iranian regime that were considered to be just people who were difficult to negotiate with, these people were terrorists. Now, people who have put the entire American cabinet, the entire leadership of this country on a hit list, the entire American leadership on a hit list, multiple lists issued by the IRGC, the military wing of the #1 state sponsor of terrorism on the planet. That is not a partner in any way, shape, or form. They are an existential enemy that you need to blow off the face of the earth if you want to have peace and if you want to have security. I mean, like, what did anyone get from trying to play nice? What, a photo op? No. The vice president smiling next to senior IRGC operatives? No. Praising the Pakistani military like this, you know, claiming that it was some sort of peace summit? I didn't see diplomacy. And you know what? The thing is that people don't realize is when you do things like all of this, the Iranians, the Pakistanis, the people, the Islamofascists in the Middle East, they don't see people who want to be diplomatic. They don't see the vice president as some sort of actor of diplomacy. They see him as a sucker. They see him as a sucker because they know that the vice president is negotiating against himself. They know that they feel that when the vice president comes here like this, after knowing, because of course he knows, he's a vice president, knowing that the Iranians have violated every single agreement in the past, he knows, obviously, that they're not serious here and that they lie, as they lie in legitimately every single negotiation possible. Now, of course, 5 seconds later, the Iranians proved this. The IRGC proved this. The state forced funeral for Khamenei, the terrorist, the theocratic dictator. Citizens were ordered to take these political targets on camera, to take the promotion of the murder of American officials, of people in Trump's cabinet, the president of the United States cabinet. They were ordered to take pictures of him, of all of them, and with targets on their head. That's disgusting. It's also, when someone tells you who they are, believe them. That was not the case with this MOU. And, you know, today we are really understanding and getting a good idea of exactly why this MOU went up in flaming defeat and why negotiating with terrorists is a bad idea. Negotiating with terrorists, as many, many people in the West have for some reason felt inclined to do, is not a productive thing. It will, in fact, blow up directly in your face every time you do it. And the reason that this is so important, as I've said, when you go and you negotiate with terrorists, you have nothing to gain here. They see you as a sucker, and they're going to take advantage of you. And then the second that they think that you are buying what they're selling, they will violate it. They will stab you directly in the back. They will shoot you directly in the head. This is why we need a strong front. I am urging President Trump to take decisive action to make sure that the leadership that has been responsible for all of Trump's foreign policy wins, and yes, he has so many foreign policy wins. I urge that those are the people that are in charge right now. I urge that those are the people that are in his office that are making these decisions, because we cannot afford the Iranian regime to prevail. We cannot, because they have vowed to destroy America. They have vowed to destroy Israel. And by proxy, they will destroy the entire West if we do not defeat them at this moment. That will conclude the show for today. I hope everyone enjoyed it. This is, of course, the very first episode of The Drew Sylver Show. If you liked it, leave a comment. If you want me to cover a different topic, please comment, please provide as much feedback as possible, because if you want to hear something and you want me to talk about it, let me know, because I will give you exactly my opinion, and then I will give you the truth, and I will make sure that the truth is heard. We will always be committed to the truth here. That is how my show is going to work. an extreme commitment to the truth. No matter who it offends, no matter who doesn't like to hear it, that is what we are going to do. The truth will be heard on my show. See you next time.